If you've ever played these kind of games which are called hybrid casual games and you felt that the time passes without you realizing, or even in more complex games, for example in Minecraft, okay, not only these kind of simple games, and you always feel super engaged, you feel that you cannot escape playing it, you have to play it a lot of hours. So this actually has an explanation, and it actually has some ways of actually you being able to implement this into your projects. And this concept has been ideated, okay, by this person over here, whose name is pretty complicated to say, and is actually over here, okay. This person over here is the creator, well, not the creator, but somebody that has actually studied and created the term flow state, okay, which then also led to this graph over here that explains all this that we have explained in the introduction of the video, okay. So let's take it step by step. So in this graph over here, what we see is that we have it as if it were a normal XY axis that we have all seen during school, okay. In the x-axis, or in the horizontal axis, it basically we have the skills, okay, needed, and we have the challenges in the y-axis, okay. And of course, as in maths, okay, this would be 0, okay, and this would be, well, let's call it plus infinite, okay, let's say, and in this case it's the same thing, okay. In this case it goes from 0, okay, to plus infinite, okay, to wherever it is. In this case it directly goes from 0, low, to high, okay, and the same thing in challenges, okay. So basically the more that we, for example, go to this point over here, the more the lower skill we need, but the more challenge we face. Whereas if we go to this point over here, we have to have a skill, okay, very high skills, and we also have very high challenges, okay. So what this graph will tell you is that what we have here in this channel over here, in this part of the graph, is basically what is called the flow channel, where the skills and the challenges are balanced in a way that the people that are playing your game feel so engaged, they're feeling so entertained, that how this is technically called is that they enter in flow state. They call it flow because it's pretty descriptive of how you feel whenever you are, I know, watching a movie, you're having a great time with whoever it is, you are visiting a new place, you finally play that game that you've ever wanted to play, whatever it is, you enter in that kind in flow state in which you don't feel that you are living here anymore. You kind of, let's say, go to another dimension in your mind. You don't feel that the time is passing, you just live, okay, and then you suddenly it rings a bell, okay, and you come back to reality and understand that you have been doing that activity in autopilot mode for the past few hours. So that is the flow state, okay, and that is the flow channel, which is field of the flow state, okay. And how to achieve this is a balance of the challenges that we set in our games and the skills, okay. So this is everything, okay. Then between the flow channel, okay, is anxiety and boredom, okay. So what happens is that if we take one point, okay, and we say, okay, we have some kind of mechanic in our game that requires, I don't know, a lot of skills, so we have to be like super good at it in order to be able to play it, okay. And not only that, but also the challenge, okay, is also a lot. We're gonna be having this, we are gonna be falling into the boredom zone, basically, okay. Of course, what we don't want our players to face. Now let's say that the challenge is very high, okay, and the player skill, okay, is super low. What's gonna happen is that the player is actually gonna feel anxiety, or I will actually put here, because anxiety does not feel quite correct, also another word that is usually used is basically frustrating for this context, okay, that we're using it for game development. That is a way more accurate word. So actually, and also here in skills, this is player skills, okay, to be even clearer, okay. So once again, to recap, if our player has, for example, medium skills, okay, so it's around over here, and the level of challenge that it has to do is also, let's say, kind of middle, okay, so it's not super high, it's not super impossible, but it is doable. So it's around here. The intersection between these 2 points would be this one over here, which, as you can see, falls inside of the flow channel. So in this situation, the player is gonna feel super engaged and in actual flow state, okay. So this is the sweet spot, for example. Now, in what other situation we may also have flow? Whenever the player does not have a lot of skill in the game, and when also the challenge is not that daunting. In that case, it is still inside of the flow channel, as you can see. And why is this important, okay? Because whenever we start a new game, okay, whenever we start a new game, what we usually have is called the onboarding or tutorial, okay. So this is a sequence that is played, or a sequence of, yes, a sequence of steps that the player has to follow in order to understand how your game works. So in that moment, the player skills are basically null, are low, are super low. So in those cases, okay, the player skills are literally in low. Now what happens is that, once again, if the player at that moment is exactly right here, okay, it has literally no skills, we cannot set a super high challenge, because if that happens, it's gonna fall into the anxiety or frustrating part of the graph. So indeed, pretty intuitively, we should understand, okay, if the player has no skill because it has just started a new game session, okay, we should probably set challenges, okay, that are pretty low, okay, that are pretty low in intensity and that people can understand a lot. That's why, for example, whenever you play these games, okay, well, in Minecraft you even had a tutorial a long time ago, but whenever you play any kind of hyper casual game, or these kind of games, or in literally all games that are even not hyper casual, you always have some kind of onboarding tutorial where you are showcased what you can do. So for example, here you can craft stuff. So in the tutorial, you're gonna teach step by step in a super simple way how you can craft new things, okay? Because what happened if in the onboarding, maybe you don't even have an onboarding or a tutorial, okay? If you don't have that, the player skills will still be null. And if you start putting more and more challenges, the skill would not have grown, and therefore the player is gonna feel anxious or frustrated, okay? So that is a way of understanding this player psychology. And talking about the onboarding or tutorial, that you can understand why this is so important, because it's the first step in a game session, okay? Whenever you start a new game, you always have a tutorial or an onboarding, and if that onboarding or tutorial is not good enough, the player skills will never grow and will always be low. And what will that mean is that it will never face more challenges, okay? And if it doesn't face more challenges or more daunting challenges, what is gonna happen is that basically the difficulty of the game increases over time. So the first puzzle that you solve is easy. So it's, let's grab another color, it's easy. So it's like the challenge is around over here. It's not very daunting. Okay, so we are still in the flow channel once again. But then the challenges get increased over time. And if the player didn't really understand the mechanics of the game, what's going to happen? Okay, then in puzzle number 5, it's not gonna really have the skills needed. Maybe it has grown a little, maybe from 0 to 1, so it is over here. So the point is over here, but as you can see, it still falls into the anxiety or frustrating area. So that is super interesting, okay? And with this, you have understood the importance of creating a good onboarding and a good tutorial. And the other thing that you have to understand is that there are two types of onboarding or tutorials, okay? And for this, what we have is a static one or a dynamic one. Okay, this is something I've already discussed in another video, but anyway. So the static one is basically when in some very simple prototypes that maybe you create, you just have text. Okay, you have text that tells you, okay, you move with W, you move with A, you move with S, you move with D, and the instructions. Okay, that is a static tutorial. But a dynamic tutorial is a tutorial in which you are taught as you play. So once again, you have a puzzle that you have to solve. So you have the board, for example, you have the grid, you have everything. So let's say I have the character over here. And you are taught how to actually, okay, move the different things, how to match 3, for example, whatever it is, you are taught. And this will actually allow you, if you choose this type, it will actually allow you to gain way more skills than just reading, okay, the text. Okay, so once again, this will allow you to gain way more skill, for example, and over time, as the game gets more complicated, let's say, okay, it gets until this complicated, for example, it will still be on flow, basically, okay? Well, actually, the point was here, but you understand the, the idea, right? So this is the key thing, and actually here, just as a summary, it's a little bit about what I've been thinking about, that, well, this graph in specific, for example, also has the usual 4 points, okay, and how to deal with each of them. So if you are, for example, in this red point over here, okay, what you have to do is increasing skills in order to reach the flow channel. Because remember, okay, here you are in a super challenging situation in which the player does not have the corresponding skills in order to get through it. So in that case, you have to increase skills. So how is this applicable in real life? So let's say that you were able to track that people completed levels 1 to 3, but not many level 4. So what that meant is that these users were in this point over here, in which you had a very high challenge, a very daunting challenge, and they didn't have the skills that they needed in order to surpass it. Okay, therefore here you already have the answer. Okay, you have to increase the skills of the player. How? Maybe if they were able to complete levels 1 to 3, maybe they were too easy, okay, and level 4 was way too complicated if we compare them, sorry. Or maybe the onboarding wasn't that clear, so whenever you wanted to add a little bit more of challenge, nobody understood what they had to do. So you understand how this is not just a random psychology theory, but it actually can be applied in games. Or for example, if you're over here in this other red point in which the player has a lot of skill, okay, or not a lot of skills, but yes, it has significant skill, but the challenge that you are setting is way too low. So once again, if, for example, a perfect example with this, sorry, I want to keep it focused. If you're in this point in which, okay, you have a good amount of skill, but the challenge is too low, it's gonna be so easy that you're gonna feel bored. An amazing way of explaining this is that, let me just replicate this graph over here. So you have these 4 points over here. Well, let's not really replicate them because here is way clearer. But you will fall, sorry, into these points over here, okay? If you, for example, are playing football with a 5-year-old, you have a lot of skill to play against somebody that is 5 years old, okay? So the challenge is so low and you have so much skill that you're gonna feel bored. But if you're playing against Messi, for example, your skills compared to Messi are gonna be very low, probably, and therefore the challenge is gonna be super high, and therefore you're gonna be falling in this category over here. Therefore, which are the two ways of dealing with this? Once again, it's the same concept but applied differently for you to understand it. If you are playing against Messi and you want to enter the flow channel or enjoy the activity a little bit more, you will have to increase your football skills, for example, okay? If you are playing against a 5-year-old, okay, and you are feeling bored, you have to increase the challenge. So for example, I know you have to play it with the other feet that you are using, okay? Or you have to, I don't know, play blindfolded or whatever it is to increase the challenge, okay? So once again, this is actually a psychology definition that can be applied to business, to self-development, okay? To video game development. So this is super interesting and important nowadays. So I hope that I have been able to explain things as much as possible, that you are able to understand something new, something that I've learned it through self-development, not by studying video game development, and it's not maybe so known or so easy to understand. That's why it's not so popular. So here in the channel, I also try not only to give you the usual game development tutorials, but also fall into the more advanced and more interesting things about the game development itself. So I hope that you have enjoyed. If this was the case, please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.